Why? Why? That is the one question that both parents in Oxford, Michigan, have for their son who committed a horrible shooting back in November 2021. If you've been following this case and watching every episode of the show, we've been telling you all about the Oxford case. To give you a quick recap, Ethan Crumbley is serving life in prison for terroristic threats and terroristic murder of 4 students. Jennifer and James Crumbley are being charged with involuntary manslaughter. Jennifer's already had her trial, but James did not have his trial until March. Until then, we will know what happens. But there's now the very latest. You're about to see a video that is shown for the very first time of Jennifer and James confronting their son. And the question they both have is why. Take a look.
It's the shocking moment the parents of school shooter Ethan Crumbley confront him for the first time after he murdered 4 students.
Why?
But the only thing he cared about was his cat, Dexter, apparently named after the fictional serial killer in the Showtime TV series Dexter. James and Jennifer Crumbley had just been told by cops that their son gunned down the students at his high school outside Detroit. They're taken to see their son, and there he was, handcuffed to the wall. He avoids making eye contact with them.
I don't think we need to ask any questions right now.
As the brief encounter ends, Ethan is only concerned about his cat, Dexter.
Why? I love you.
His father is distraught and sobbing. His mother is truly upset by his lack of emotion. Video of the bizarre confrontation was played for the jury at the trial of Ethan Crumbley's mother, who's charged with manslaughter, the first time a parent has been tried for killings committed by their child. Her boss, Andrew Smith, told the jury about the moment she learned there was an active shooter at the school.
I heard some loud commotion outside my office, like yelling, and I saw her racing down the hall.
Later, she texted him, "OMG, Andy, he's going to kill himself. He must be the shooter. Ethan did it."
Ethan Crumbley was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His parents have been in jail for more than 2 years awaiting trial, unable to make the $500,000 bond. Mr. Crumbley's trial is set for March.
So now you just heard it, but there's probably new developments in this case. The former dean found it odd, which was the boss.
The trial for Michigan mom Jennifer Crumbley is underway. Crumbley's charged with involuntary manslaughter along with her husband after their son shot and killed 4 mates at a Michigan high.
And it's like this.
And the trial continues.
When we deal with people, I mean, it's like when we deal with something like this, it's like, what the hell do we do? We know they failed to do so. They failed to talk to Ethan. If he hadn't talked to his son or given him that gun, there would not be a school shooting. We wouldn't be talking about this throughout the 2 years we've been doing this. But Ethan did it, and now he has to pay the price for what he did. When you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences. That's key here. Everyone may agree, or everyone may not agree with me. Okay. There probably ain't nothing more to. I would go on break right away. Then it'd be wasting. Then we all be wasting a bunch of time here, but. In the meantime, is your school performing an illegal search on you? Take a look at this.
To go through your stuff?
I'm gonna need to see what's in. Hold on, the bell doesn't dismiss you.
Are teachers allowed to go through your stuff?
I'm gonna need to see what's inside your backpack.
What? Why?
Because I think you stole test answers from my desk.
Why would you think that?
Because there's no way you scored that high without them. Now hand over the backpack.
Wait, you can't do that.
Right, Mike?
He's right. Teachers don't have a right to randomly search you.
Ha! What about a strong hunch? Nope. Reasonable suspicion is more like another student informing you that a student is carrying weapons or contraband. And the search would turn up evidence.
You know what? I got nothing to hide. Go ahead. Search my backpack.
Now I know you're messing with me. It's not in your backpack. The answers must be in your pants. I'm giving you a strip search.
No, I'm just a boy. Mike, help.
You definitely can't do that. The second thing is that the search cannot be intrusive. How do you define intrusive? By the student's age and gender, the gender of the teacher doing the search, and the rule or law you suspect is being broken.
Yeah, you can't jump down my pants with test answers.
But he could maybe if he thought you had a weapon.
Fair enough.
Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you scored so high because you've been hanging out with Mike so much. Exactly.
Are teachers...
Maybe later in the broadcast we'll do a Good Memory Classic all about school searching. Not just meaning the schools in the Fourth Amendment. That's our Good Memory Classic bit later on. Lance Williams, the anchor, could have a miracle for somebody. But who is that person he could get that miracle to that might have a match for what he had? Stay with us and find out. Yesterday, I brought you the story of Lance Williams, who had cancer. But it would only come through miracles. But from one stranger, as you might see. We've also told you about what happened during his time as a local anchor. But who was that mysterious person? Who was that stranger who could get that miracle to? Family members may not have it, but this person may have it. Here again is Victoria Corderi.
I want to be a family again. I'm worrying so much about tomorrow and next week and next month.
For years, Amy Williams relied on her deep faith to get her through any situation. But she'd never faced anything like this before. The imminent and painful death of the man she loved most in the world.
I feel afraid that Lance will die suddenly.
So much had happened in such a short time. Just 9 weeks after she had given birth to her second child, her husband had been diagnosed with a rare and deadly cancer. And now Amy was on a death watch.
What do we have the drip for? An hour or half an hour?
Hour.
The chemotherapy, the chemicals that were supposed to be killing the cancer cells, began killing Lance as well. He was so sick he wasn't aware that friends from his church and his television station were rallying around his family in these desperate hours, pitching in to watch the kids, working in the yard, even doing home repairs. But most of all, doing this.
Lord, we thank you that
Lance's church prayed fervently for his recovery. And even his co-workers, hard-bitten journalists not known to clasp hands in prayer in the office, began doing just that. Anchorwoman Gail Sierens organized a prayer circle.
We did it because Lance needed a miracle. And that's what we prayed for. We prayed for a miracle. We're doing a hard hit.
Gail says she knew a prayer group was very much out of the ordinary for a newsroom. But she also knew how much Lance's faith meant to him.
It started out as maybe 3 or 4. The next thing you know, we were circled all the way around the conference room, and we would always hold our hands and pray.
Stand by.
And it wasn't just the newsroom. With management's consent, Gail decided to make a public plea.
We ask if you believe in the power of prayer, this might be a good time to say some prayers for Lance and for his family. Like, it was great to say it, and because suddenly our little prayer chain up in our newsroom had expanded by hundreds of thousands of people.
So basically you were inviting Tampa to join your prayer circle?
Yes.
You think Tampa did?
I know they did.
If News Channel 8 crossed some journalistic line, Gail Sierens says she doesn't care.
Did you have any reservation? It sounds like you didn't.
I personally didn't. I'm not the boss. I didn't go look through my old journalism book and say, now, is this the right thing for a reporter to be doing? It didn't. At that point, it didn't matter to me.
You couldn't not do it, especially in local television news. Your on-air personalities form personal bonds.
with the audience.
News director Forrest Carr is the boss, and he was determined to do whatever it took to help Lance. And in the meantime, the medical profession was doing all it could too. The National Marrow Donor Registry identified 43 potential donors from all over the world who might provide Lance with the match he needed to save his life.
Hey, you happy to be home? Just in time for Thanksgiving.
By Thanksgiving, Lance had weathered the worst of the chemotherapy. It had been 7 excruciating weeks in the hospital that he barely survived. But now he was well enough to return home in extremely weak condition.
Daddy, what are you most grateful for this Thanksgiving? He looked like death. He could hardly talk. He had to be carried up the stairs and from the car. He was in a wheelchair.
So sad. I mean, that wasn't the man I knew. I just ached for him.
And 3-year-old Palmer was aching too.
What did you tell Palmer?
I told him that Daddy was very sick and that his blood was sick.
Did he ever ask you, is Daddy gonna die?
No, he never did. And that actually concerned me.
Then one night, Palmer asked to say the blessing before supper.
When he prayed, he thanked God that Daddy hadn't gone to heaven yet. And so that was the first time he really let us know that he understood a little bit of what was going on.
So what did you think then, when he said that?
It just hurt me for him so much because I knew he must be living with that fear.
The same fear you were living with.
Mm-hmm.
In December, while the search continued for a bone marrow donor, Amy began an exhaustive search to find a doctor she trusted to perform Lance's transplant. She flew across the country to the City of Hope National Medical Center in Duarte, California. Normally, patients come for the evaluation, but Lance was still too weak to travel, so Amy went as his representative, with plenty of questions for transplant expert Dr. Stephen Foreman.
I think what I was struck by was the calm that she exuded under what I thought were enormously difficult circumstances.
Did you get the sense she was fighting for her husband's life?
Without a doubt. She was indeed fighting for his life, their life, the lives of their children.
And she was interviewing you?
Evaluating you? Truth be told, I think she was.
I was.
You were?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do this.
So Amy decided if a donor were found that the City of Hope and Dr. Foreman would perform the harrowing procedures necessary for the transplant. In the meantime, Lance was back in the hospital, struggling with more chemotherapy.
I need a 1 milligram Kytrol for Lance Williams.
But little by little, he regained his strength. For the first time, he started getting some good news.
He said you look terrific, yeah. He said
Oh,
no blood, no platelets.
Great.
Have a good weekend.
By the spring of 2001, less than 7 months after he was diagnosed, Lance learned he had a fighting chance of survival. The chemo worked, reducing the leukemia in Lance's bone marrow from more than 96% to just 1%. He was almost in remission.
Now this whole story blew apart.
Lance was still thin and weak, but he returned to work.
And Lance, may I say one other thing?
Yes.
How wonderful it is to have you on television with us tonight.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Lance wanted to stay busy while waiting for a bone marrow donor. But again, the news was not good. One by one, each of the original 43 candidates proved not to be an acceptable match.
as time went on, now I think we both grew pretty hopeless about that.
The best donor for Lance would be a large man, because he would be able to provide more marrow. By early May, there were only 3 candidates left. Then, a match. Lance's donor was not exactly what the doctors had told the Williams to hope for. She was a petite, 105-pound teenage girl.
And she's last, almost last on the list of who looks good, so.
But she was a near-perfect match, and also willing to go under anesthesia and allow needles to extract the life-giving marrow. Amy immediately wrote a thank you letter to the donor, who, according to the rules of the National Marrow Registry, had to remain anonymous. The registry forwarded the note. Amy also sent this family photo, which would have far-reaching consequences later on.
Dear friend, I cannot imagine why a young woman of 19 cared enough to be a donor. I wonder if someone close to you needed a transplant. I so hope that we will one day meet.
That good news, though, was overshadowed within hours by bad results from Lance's latest biopsy. The leukemia had surged again, which means the odds of surviving a bone marrow transplant were reduced dramatically. Lance was so weak he could never withstand another round of chemotherapy. But then, the very next day, there came a remarkable announcement.
This drug has been engineered in the laboratory to target a single cancer-causing protein and, like a light switch, turn off its signal to produce leukemia cells.
On May 10, 2001, the FDA approved a new anti-cancer drug called Gleevec. Gleevec was being hailed as a wonder drug because it could destroy cancer cells with very few side effects. But it had never been tested on Lance's type of leukemia. Regardless, Lance's doctors decided it was his only chance to battle the cancer into remission.
Now, there have been a range of miracles in this whole story. But if I had to point to one, I'd point to that one.
Tonight, you hope for thousands of people battling a deadly type of cancer.
News Channel 8 told its audience about Gleevec in every newscast that night.
Well, Bob, Lance is very excited about Gleevec, and so is his family.
And Lance, the interviewer, became the interviewee.
This isn't the percentage of cancer cells that causes you to be so sick. It's the chemo and the treatment.
Right.
He spoke not only about what the drug meant for him, but for possibly thousands of other cancer patients.
I would love to see the faces of other cancer patients who now know that they have hope.
This tough reporter was overwhelmed with the turn of events, and it showed on the air that night.
And my wife to spend her life without her husband. So that
Gleevec is supposed to put cancer into remission, and if that happened, Lance would be able to undergo the bone marrow transplant. But it usually takes months for Gleevec to take effect, and Lance didn't have any time to waste. So he flew from Tampa to the City of Hope National Medical Center in California to get the bone marrow transplant without knowing if the Gleevec had worked.
It was like the Hail Mary pass. He was just going out there and
he's either gonna die right here in Tampa of leukemia, or we'll hope the Gleevec has had some effect.
Now Lance's survival relied on a bunch of yellow pills, the expertise of doctors, and perhaps all the thousands of people praying for a miracle.
And we can all use that miracle. So what's going to happen now with Lance Williams after that yellow pill? And will that transfer ever work? When we come back, Victoria Cordero continues her story as the miracle in Tampa survives. Stay with us. We return now to our story. You've heard Lance Williams say he had cancer. You've also seen a pill that approved by the Food and Drug Administration that would help fight that cancer cell in that body. But it would take more than a miracle for this television reporter to fight that cancer. So he and the rest of his family flew to California to get that transplant. But will it work? It will take a miracle and some faith. Here's Victoria Cordero.
This is News Channel 8 on your side at 5.
And now a remarkable update on one of News Channel 8's own who has been involved in the battle of his life over the past year.
By now, News Channel 8's audience in Tampa knew all about Lance Williams and his struggle to beat his deadly cancer. They responded with calls, letters, and emails. And for some viewers, it was more than just a story.
Lance, my thoughts, prayers, and hopes are with you and your family.
Christine Lewis wrote that she'd lost her sister to cancer. At the same time, Lance was waging his war with leukemia.
I just remember that story touching me to the core. That I needed to say something for cancer survivors, then I felt like Jane. My sister was drawing me to say something.
Christine waited anxiously, along with other viewers, to see if the Gleevec would help Lance. And soon she found out. Lance's first biopsy after arriving at the City of Hope was nothing short of astounding.
We want to share some good news we received today about a member of our News Channel 8 family. Reporter Lance Williams, who is battling leukemia, is in complete remission.
The Gleevec worked, but its effects are temporary. The remission would only last weeks, a few months at most. So his doctors had to act fast to prepare him for the bone marrow transplant.
So they'll shoot me up with more chemo and radiation.
Amy left 10-month-old Olivia and 4-year-old Palmer in the care of her sister in Alabama, then flew to California to join Lance, who was about to undergo full-body radiation to destroy any leukemia cells that might still be in his body. Stephen Foreman was Lance's doctor.
Was there a good chance that he might not even survive that?
There was some chance he was not going to survive that, and that was my biggest worry.
A week after the start of the radiation, which covered his throat and stomach in sores, Lance began intense chemotherapy that once again took him to the brink of death. Lance had to be raced to intensive care with a massive fluid buildup around his heart because of the chemotherapy.
He had a number of problems. His mouth, his brain, his heart, his lungs.
In fact, Lance was so weak, the family and the doctor had to decide whether or not to go forward with the transplant.
And made the decision, together, to proceed. In part because there was no other option.
This was his last hope.
This was, and quite frankly, his only hope.
The night before Lance's transplant, News Channel 8's Gail Sierens once again made an on-the-air pitch for prayer.
Please continue those prayers because they're being heard.
I'll say
It was June 19, 2001, 8.5 months after being diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Lance was ready for the transplant.
Lance was about to undergo one of the most dangerous procedures in medicine because doctors had to destroy his entire immune system to prevent rejection of the donor marrow. But as harrowing as the preparations are, the transplant itself is very uneventful. It isn't even surgery.
A small bag of bone marrow like this one, donated by an anonymous teenage girl, was connected to an IV line and slowly dripped potentially life-saving cells into Lance's body.
It was a snack-sized baggie, practically. I think it literally took 9 minutes.
It usually takes 3 weeks for the transplanted bone marrow cells to start growing. But just 9 days after Lance's transplant, his body began shutting down. Fluid again building up around his heart. He was rushed to emergency surgery. Lance seemed to be losing his painful battle. Shortly after heart surgery, hallucinations began to torment him, a condition called ICU psychosis.
I am missing Lance so much. I long to see his eyes, his expressions. How I would love to curl up with him and hold him. Even more to have him hold me.
3 weeks passed, and Lance's body still showed no sign that the donor marrow was working. The days seemed interminable. Amy spent the time reading lab reports, and she says, watching other patients die.
It is 10:30 a.m. 2 people have died this morning in the ICU. 2 sets of family members suffering, crying, saying final goodbyes.
Amy feared she might be next to say her final goodbyes. But then, once again, at a time when there appeared to be no hope at all, prayers were answered. On day 25, the lab report showed some magic, life-transforming news.
WBC, white blood count, 300.
Lab speak for success. The donor marrow was growing. It meant for this patient of last resort, this man who had endured 9 months of suffering and bad news, there was finally reason to hope.
Sounds like a miracle.
Yeah, sure, it was a miracle. But he has a long way to go. Has he done better than we thought? Yes, at every point along the way.
3 months after the transplant, Lance was allowed to travel back to Florida.
We do have some really good news to share with you tonight. News Channel 8 reporter Lance Williams is in remission and he is back home.
For News Channel 8, it was a collective sigh of relief. The news report that night showed a special homecoming. Lance returning to the people from church and from the newsroom who had been praying for his recovery.
This is just a moment that we'll obviously never forget, and it is indeed an answer to so many prayers.
They celebrated the friend who had been given a stay of execution from a deadly cancer.
He says, go ahead.
Few people expected Lance to survive the rigors of the disease and the treatment. Amy had kept all her hope at bay until now.
You're glad to have a husband.
Mm-hmm. So glad. I'm so glad my children had a daddy.
When Lance sat down to speak with us, he had a unique perspective of the disease which several times almost killed him.
Have you thought about what leukemia or what this cancer is to you?
What a blessing.
A blessing.
What a blessing. If the healing that I've experienced so far can be an encouragement to other people, it is worth every bit of it.
Even after all you've gone through?
Absolutely. It has been such a teacher to me to learn to endure long-term difficulty, because there will be another side. I will either get better or I will get worse and I will die, but time will pass, and it's how we deal with it that will make a difference in my life, my wife's, my children's, my friends, and complete strangers' lives. And what could be dearer than that?
Lance was still weak and needed to walk with a cane, and he faced the prospect that his body might reject the marrow and that the leukemia could return.
I don't want to face relapse. I don't want to live with pain. I live with the joy of seeing my kids for the day that I see them, being with my wife for the day that I'm with her, being able to go to work. And I hope that that lasts until I die a natural death.
November 2001, 2 months after his homecoming, Lance returned to work fragile and limping from nerve damage caused by the chemotherapy.
It was medicine, just to feel as if I was being productive, just to interact with my colleagues.
Does he look like Lance Williams like he used to look? No. But that's not the way I live in this story. I live for every little step in the right direction. And right now, we're living that.
But there was one more dramatic twist that lay ahead for Lance. A message from the person who gave him a second chance at life. For Lance, his angel.
Dear Lance, my name is Erin Wiles, and I was the one who donated the marrow for your transplant.
But when we come back, you're gonna meet this woman, and you're gonna hear why she wrote that letter and why she was a match. Stay with us. Returning now to our story, Lance Williams just got out of a transplant, and he was going back to work, but there was still a piece of the mystery that needed to be solved. That mysterious woman who wrote to Lance, who gave Lance that transplant, wrote him a letter. Who was she? You're about to meet the mysterious woman who wrote that letter and gave him that transplant. Once again, here's Victoria Corderi.
December 2001, just days after Lance returned to work, he received an email that stunned him.
Pulled up this one piece of mail and it said, "Dear Lance."
My name is Erin Wiles, and I was the one who donated the marrow for your transplant.
It was something that was never supposed to happen. The young girl who saved Lance's life tracked him down.
And all of a sudden it became so real. It became so overwhelming.
I understand that contacting you is against policy and that you might not want to get in touch with me.
Dear Erin, I just found your email and I can't stop the tears. I feel as if I'm breaking some law by writing to you, but I wouldn't miss the chance for the world.
But now there was no turning back. Lance had often wondered, who was this teenage girl who had given a part of herself so unselfishly? And why would she go through a bone marrow extraction to save a perfect stranger? He was about to find out the answer to those questions.
They tell you that this is the person's last option, and without this he will die for sure.
The teenager from Tennessee horse country considers herself nothing special. She says she was moved to become a donor when her high school teacher's son died of leukemia. He was only 6 years old, and a donor was never found.
Just seeing how tough that was on him, you know. It was tough on everybody. It was really sad.
When Erin turned 18, she was eligible to register as a bone marrow donor. She did immediately. Within months, she was matched up to Lance. And in a procedure like this, under local anesthesia, doctors used large needles to puncture her pelvis about 80 times, extracting her bone marrow. She walked out of the hospital sore, but unruffled by what she had done.
I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. You know, I didn't know the person. It was just some imaginary person somewhere that was getting it.
Lance was still imaginary to Erin because the bone marrow donor registry wants it that way. It went to great lengths to edit all of the letters they were sending to each other for months, to remove all traces of identity except for first names. It's done for a year with one goal in mind, to protect the donors from blaming themselves if the cancer patients die. If they survive, though, the identity is revealed.
But Erin says she felt invested in her patient's survival from the moment she saw this picture that Amy sent her.
It definitely just put everything in a different light, seeing, you know, two little bitty kids and their dad and his wife, and they just seem like real people, like a real family somewhere.
Was it bothering you that you didn't know more? You itching to know more?
A little. I just wanted to know how he was doing, really.
Then Erin received a clue about her patient's identity that the marrow registry had overlooked. This letter, a Lance update written by Amy, had the Williams last name embossed on it.
And then I just went to search engine and typed in Lance Williams.
And you knew the rules, and you decided to break them anyway. So why were you willing to take that chance?
He was doing so well, and you know, everything looked good. I made it different. I thought I didn't need protection anymore.
So in December 2001, 6 months after Lance's transplant, Erin Wiles wrote him that first email.
I'm so excited and grateful to hear that you are doing much better.
Now Erin and Lance and Amy could contact each other directly, and that was the beginning of an intense email and letter writing relationship between this tenacious Tennessee teenager and the Florida family to whom she'd given a second chance.
You think about the connection you have?
You know that that person was used not to give you a second chance, to give you a second life. And you know there's nothing you can ever do or say to adequately express to them how grateful you are.
Soon, Lance would get the chance to show Erin just how grateful he was.
This is the person that is largely responsible for saving my life. What do you say to somebody like that?
And what do you say to somebody like that? When we come back, two people get reunited. The transfer meets the transferee. Victoria Corderi with the conclusion of our story. Stay with us. And now the conclusion of our story. Now the conclusion of our story. This person is now about to meet Lance Williams, who gave him a second chance for the very first time. You're about to see the angel who gave that person that second chance. Here, with the conclusion of our story, Victoria Corderi.
Lance's bone marrow donor, Erin Wiles, had found him on her own, but they'd never met. So we made that happen. Dateline flew Erin to Florida.
I'm getting a little more nervous.
Lance and Amy waited anxiously.
It's as if I'm meeting a long-lost sibling or a parent that I never knew. This woman is now a part of our family.
I'm really excited. There she is. Should we come? Let's go.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Welcome. Hello. Thank you so much for coming. This is Amy.
So good to see you.
For the past year and a half, News Channel 8 reporter Lance Williams has been in a battle for his life. He's fighting leukemia, and a couple of times it almost won.
That night, News Channel 8 viewers who had been praying for Lance's recovery learned about this special meeting and saw a man with gratitude and hope that he'll see his children grow up.
And as Amy said, my prayer is that you would dance at your daughter's wedding.
Anchor Gail Sierens, Lance's good friend, was overcome with emotion.
Erin Wiles signed up to be a donor because of a 6-year-old boy she knew and died because there wasn't a donor.
You were barely able to speak. What was happening?
When he said, what he really wanted to do was live long enough to dance at his daughter's wedding. For him to just say those words said to me, he lives with those thoughts all the time, and I almost couldn't bear that.
But for Erin and Lance, this day was anything but sad. It was the beginning of what they hope is a lifelong friendship. In fact, Lance helped Erin get an internship at News Channel 8. And last summer, she lived with the Williams family.
And so you were an answer to their prayers.
And they were to mine too at the same time.
Lance says his prayers were answered many years ago when he met Amy.
She really is the hero of this story. There's not a week that goes by that I don't think, why would God bless me with her or with my children? Okay, all right.
Those who love him, his family, his friends, try only to dwell in hope for his survival.
I don't want to lose my friend Lance. He has so much to give this world. He's just getting started.
Lance, though, prefers to focus on the extraordinary fact that he's alive today.
And I ask myself daily why I am so blessed to be spared even one more day. And I think that even if I died tomorrow, think of all the days I have been given to be with them. Who is richer than I?
He knows he lives with some cold statistics. Even with a successful transplant, he has just a 60% chance of living more than 5 years. That doesn't faze Lance Williams, though. After all, he believes in miracles.
It's been 2 years since Lance Williams' bone marrow transplant. He is cancer-free and working full-time. Erin Wiles is about to start a second summer internship at Lance's TV station, and she plans to stay again with the Williams family.
What a great miracle. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. You look everywhere for your keys, and 20 minutes later you find them where they always are, staring you right in the face. Ever happened to you? It's pretty common if it's just a set of keys. But what if you're driving and it's another car passing by? You just can't believe your own eyes. As you're about to see in this Dateline test, you won't believe your own eyes. Here's Mike Taibbi.
It may happen to any of us, anytime, anywhere, whenever we get behind the wheel of a car. It may already have happened to the submarine commander whose sub slammed into a Japanese fishing vessel. And it may have happened to this Boston cop who was so intent on chasing a suspect down this street that he raced right by a brutal beating.
In fact, it occurs so often in everyday life that a psychology professor from Harvard made it a big part of his career to help explain this astonishing phenomenon of human nature. He began by developing some of academic science's most innovative and startling experiments.
So, what exactly is it? Okay, pull up a chair, get close to your TV sets. And you'll find out by participating in the professor's very same experiments. Let's see how well you do. Dan Simons is the architect of those experiments, and he has some instructions for you at home.
In this video, there are 3 players wearing white shirts passing a basketball, and your task is to count how many passes they make.
It sounds simple, but it's not. It's made harder by the fact that there are also 3 players with black shirts, and they're tossing around passes too. Now remember, as you watch this video, only count the passes by the white team. Are you ready? Start counting. Okay, that's it. How many passes did you see? Well, we had some 15 volunteers take the same experiment in our makeshift Dateline lab, and they had their own answers.
14.
15.
There were 16.
15.
16. 14.
Do you agree with any of these people? How many passes were there really? Well, we'll give you another shot. As we said, this is much harder than you think. And just a reminder, don't forget to include the bounce passes. They count too. So how many passes did you see this time? If you said 10, you're too low, 20 too high. And if this were a cutthroat reality program, you'd likely be voted off the show already. But don't worry, not only will we give you the answer later, you'll even get a chance to redeem yourself in another experiment.
Hi, you here for the Dateline study?
Yeah.
Now in this one, we want you to watch this woman closely as she walks down a long hallway and signs up for a Dateline study.
Just read this over and then fill it out.
Try to remember as much as you can about her. We'll be asking you questions later.
Is 6?
Yes. Thank you. I just have to give you something.
Take that down the hall.
Okay, got that? What exactly did you notice? Her hairstyle, the color of her shirt, what she said? Anything else? Now we're going to ask you to remember even more.
You here for the Dateline study?
Yes. Pay attention to this man as he goes down the hall and approaches this desk.
Read that and then sign. Okay. Sec. Just have to file this and get you one thing.
Take that back down the hall.
Thank you. Okay, got that? And lastly, focus on this woman. Don't forget to remember what you can about her.
Okay, I just have to do get one more thing.
Just take that down the hall.
Now, whatever details you can recall, we have to confess that was just a smokescreen. We actually were testing something else, because these experiments were not really about what you saw, but what you didn't see. And if you're like most people, you probably missed something very big. Okay, time to let you in on our secret. This time, as this woman signs in, pay more attention to the person behind the desk, not the one in front of it.
Okay, just need to get you something.
Take that down there.
How about that? Did you catch Dateline's version of identity fraud?
Yep, straight ahead.
Whenever one man ducked down, the other man popped right up.
Take that down there.
To make matters worse, the second time you took this test, the two guys weren't even wearing the same colored shirts. And though you certainly saw this guy inadvertently bump up the experiment, Did you even notice that he hadn't been the one standing there just seconds before? If you didn't catch any of these changes, don't worry. You are not alone.
Do you want me to be a witness to workman's compensation?
Like you, those people you watched walking down that hall, and most of the others we tested, also missed it.
Take that back to me, Annabelle.
Oh, it's a different guy. Oh, that's too funny.
Were they twins or something?
Twins? Well, they're both Dateline staffers. They're both in their late 20s with similar builds, but they're hardly lookalikes. And even less so when we dressed them differently.
Never even looked at his shirt.
Weren't one professorial with glasses,
Oh, whoa. That happened?
made the other all business with a necktie.
That's a different guy.
In the end, most subjects, the ones filling out the forms, or you at home focusing on those people walking down the hall, just didn't see the big picture, as was the case in that resounding hit and miss.
And that, in a lot of ways, goes against our intuition, because we feel that at any instant we're taking in everything that we're looking at.
And if you think that experiment was amazing, there was something else that may shock you even more. And it showed up in that basketball video we played for you earlier. Now, watch that experiment once again, but this time, don't count the passes, just take in all the action. What was that? Back it up. That's right, a big hairy gorilla. And he didn't just make a split-second cameo either. He was front and center for 9 full seconds, even posing like King Kong for all the world to see. But if you didn't see it, you are in good company. In test after test, regardless of age, education, or profession, Professor Simon says half the people or more miss the gorilla. Like this man.
No way.
And him.
That wasn't in there.
And him.
Now I know that bear didn't come through there.
The gorilla?
Gorilla. I know that didn't go through there the first time, did it?
Absolutely is the same tape.
Oh, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. It didn't go through there the first time.
You want to see it one more time?
This is the first one, right?
That's the same thing. So why do we miss such obvious things that are right in front of us? Simon says that missing the gorilla comes from paying too much attention, a phenomenon the scientific community calls inattentional blindness, while he says missing the people switch comes from just not focusing enough.
If you're paying attention to the color of a person's shirt, you might not notice the shape of their nose. Or if you're paying attention to the shape of their nose, you're not going to notice what they're wearing.
These experiments, while lighthearted, confirm scientifically and once and for all those everyday oversights that plague every one of us. Not seeing your keys that are right in front of you, not seeing your friend waving at you as you walk by, and not remembering who your waiter or waitress is. Excuse me.
Not me.
In the end, Dan Simons, now in the psychology department at the University of Illinois, says that we don't see everything we think we do. And that, he warns, can have some dangerous and even deadly consequences. He says it may be why the submarine commander didn't see that fishing boat, and maybe why that Boston cop, who claimed a kind of tunnel vision while chasing a murder suspect, said he didn't see the brutal beating right nearby. And for you and me, it may be why driving, especially those times when we look but don't see, is one of the most dangerous things that we do every day.
Our intuition is that the kid on the bicycle is going to jump out at you, and you'll notice it and you'll be able to avoid it. What these studies suggest is that that's not the case.
Just have to get me something.
And they also suggest that we're not as safe as we think we are. And as a result, we have to be even more attentive and careful.
You're never going to be able to completely avoid all of the possible unexpected things that could happen. We have to be aware that we will sometimes be unaware.
As you know by now, counting the passes was just a ruse, but for those of you still wondering, the correct answer was 15 passes. If you'd like to learn more about these tests, log on to our website. The address is dateline.msnbc.com.
Inattentional blindness. It's what happened to all of us. We couldn't even know where our keys are, and this, and this. I couldn't even see y'all. I couldn't even see how much time I got left on the camera, or I couldn't even see where my drink was. It's intentional blindness. It could help save your life in all dangerous situations. So that's the moral of this. That's the moral of what's going on. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with our viral break. Stay with us. Before we move on to tonight's viral break, here's a preview of a story you'll see coming up next week on the broadcast.
In a case that shocked the community, a Seattle school teacher is being sentenced today for having sex with her 6th grade student and having his baby.
Mary Kay Letourneau, her crimes of passion landed her in prison, but a decade later, her passion is no longer a crime.
The best part of it is when announced as a husband and wife.
Tonight, for the first time since their wedding, Mary Kay Letourneau and the boy she loved, Philly Folau, sit down for a primetime interview. A freewheeling exchange about the seduction he says he planned.
I mean, I wanted her, so I wasn't going to stop.
Her surprising take on the danger of her situation.
What were you worried about?
His mother getting angry?
That's it. You weren't thinking to yourself, I could go to jail?
Oh, no. And their seemingly normal life today.
Who takes out the trash? I do. Who makes the decisions? Both of us. Who's more romantic?
Yeah.
She did.
I like that.
The story only they can tell. Josh Mankiewicz with A Love Like No Other.
That's coming up next week. Coming up tomorrow on the broadcast, your mobile home could be destroyed by earthquakes. But is it really? You'll see hidden camera footage about companies who ripped you off about your mobile homes. That's on Friday. Now, tonight's viral break is going to be about the story that had happened when a team refused to do a Nazi salute in that prom photo. If you saw that story years ago, you may have seen that photo of a bunch of prom students doing the Hitler salute. I'm not going to show you the Hitler salute because I think that's offensive. Take a look at the story.
The brave boy who refused to give a Nazi salute in the photo that's shocking America is speaking out.
As soon as I heard the photographer say, "Raise your hand," I knew what was going to happen. He said, "Raise your hand." He did not say, "Raise your hand" in a Nazi symbol way. I'm pretty sure my classmate just interpreted as, "Raise your hand. Let's do this as a joke."
Jordan Blue spoke to CBS News reporter Adriana Diaz.
Do you think the other kids know what that symbol represented?
I think they did. It did not represent my morals, and I could not do something that I didn't believe in.
The small city of Baraboo, Wisconsin now finds itself in a national firestorm. How could a bunch of high school kids do such a thing? It was a topic at last night's school board meeting.
A demonstration of an absolutely despicable attitude.
And there is nothing but praise for Jordan Blue. The brave boy who refused to give a Nazi salute in the photo that shocked.
Wow. If you were like that kid, you would say, "Nope, I ain't doing that. I'm not doing that salute. No way, shape, or form, I'm not doing that." But even if I did, we wouldn't be discussing this. Or we wouldn't be talking about it either. Because I would never do that Hitler salute. Even if I did, it's not cool. Alright. Coming tomorrow on Throwback Thursday. The love swindle scam. Young people taking advantage of elderly men who take advantage of not just them, but their life savings. One family, over 2 elderly men, tell their stories about when they were taken advantage of by these Samoan women. You'll get a first-hand account about how it's done from investigators, and you'll meet someone who had to lock the television set. And you'll get a chance to meet one of the people caught in this story. Did they have something to do with it? Were there lawsuits? about this. The love swindle scam. That's on Throwback. That's on Throwback Thursday. The next Throwback Thursday, Ford sexual harassment. A bunch of women came forward saying that they were sexually harassed. Actually, that's going to be on our Give Me a Classic come up on Friday. Also come up on Friday, our Give Me a Break Classic, all about Ford sexual harassment. A bunch of women came forward saying that they were being sexually harassed by Ford male companies, Ford male employees. Sorry, you're going to see videotape footage of a horrific sex party that was not to be seen, as well as some graphic pictures that you at home may not realize. That's on Friday. That's our Classic Game Break on Friday. That's all for this edition of Game Break Wednesday going to Thursday. We'll see you again for Throwback Thursday. For all of us here at YouTube and Give Me a Break, stop bullying, speak up, concentration not strength, no jaywalking. Good night.